he answered John, reassuring him. I think I've recovered quite a bit. He straightened up, taking a deep breath. Let's see. Jack walked over to Raison's corpse and casually picked up his sword. He removed his cumbersome cloak and then fastened the long sword to his hip. This is enough. His gaze then shifted towards Chip's body. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke. John. John, who had been watching his back, responded immediately, yes. Young master. Chip is dead. He stepped forward and ground his heel into Chip's head. I had intended to groom him into one of my subordinates. John, looking at Chip, also expressed his thoughts. For a knight trainee, you could say he made a wise decision. Jack agreed with John's viewpoint. That's why, from the very beginning, he was just a pathetic chip. I never saw any hope in him. Immediately afterwards, he turned and asked John. But John, yes. John looked at him questioningly. You're not even surprised by my ability to turn back time. Isn't there anything you're curious about? Jack's casual question caused John to fall into deep thought. Something that makes me curious. Like, for example, what happened to her in the future, or what happened to the Marquis family in the future? John then said, I can imagine, but thinking about how it was destroyed. He looked at Jack, sighed, and judging by your reaction, the process certainly wasn't pleasant. Jack approached him, lowering his voice. I can tell you, but it's best not to speak of it. But if you're really curious, I'll tell you. Jack gave John a sly smile. Are you curious now? Looking at Jack's expectant gaze, John held his ground, hesitantly replying, no, not really. Jack looked a little disappointed, pointing at John in exasperation. You're so boring, John. You don't know anything. You just keep saying sorry, sorry. He asked another question, seemingly trying to stir up the desire for knowledge within him. So, aren't you curious about what happened to John in the future? This time, John was indeed somewhat interested, but not intensely so. He scratched his head and said, I wonder if he's still alive. John spoke of himself with confidence, his tone unwavering. I'm not someone who dies unexpectedly. Jack's words instantly shattered his confidence. You're right. John couldn't help but be stunned. He seemed unable to believe it, and asked again, as if to make sure he hadn't misheard. Jack looked at John with a serious expression. You died unexpectedly. John's rosy face turned pale in an instant, his mood heavy. I understand. John now resembled a puppy who had made a mistake, his ears and tail drooping. Jack couldn't help but comfort him. Don't be too discouraged by this. Having said that, he climbed back into the carriage. Well, I'm going to rest for a bit. Only then did John come back to his senses, turning around and replying, Yes, sir. Jack stepped inside the carriage, closed the door, and lay directly down on the seat. He rested his hand on his forehead, as if pondering something. Outside, John walked around, inspecting the bodies. These soldiers all died with their eyes wide open, because until the moment of their deaths, their faces were filled with terror. Perhaps they would never have expected such a situation to occur. John reached out and closed their eyes, as if seeing them off on their final journey, while silently assessing the power of the attack in his heart. One sword strike, one attack, and 25 lives taken. I don't even know if it can be considered a single sword strike anymore. Looking at the wounds on their bodies, he couldn't help but be astonished. All of them died from a pierced heart, but it doesn't look like they were stabbed by a sword. How could he have unleashed such an attack? Inside the carriage, Jack was enduring excruciating pain, both physical and mental. The pain caused him to tremble uncontrollably, losing his composure. John looked at Jack's carriage, a contemplative expression on his face. Despite this, he was still concerned about his young master. After reversing time, what kind of life have you lived, young master? He observed the movements within the carriage, thinking to himself, will this really be all right? I'm so worried. Jack jolted awake after hearing John's urgent calls. Young master, young master. He sat up abruptly, clutching his chest. His face contorted in pain. Seeing Jack's poor condition, John anxiously asked, You've taken the medicine, but are you truly all right? Jack wiped the sweat from his brow, adjusted his collar, and didn't bother hiding his discomfort as he groaned. So it's you, John. I'm not all right at all. This pain is killing me. John knelt on one knee, holding an earthen-colored cloth pouch embroidered with a floral pattern. I understand. I've searched through all their belongings. There are 5 grade 1 potions, identical to the one you just took. In addition, there are 63 gold coins. Jack scoffed, casually remarking, I figured even those hounds would carry around some questionable money. Jack held out his hand, taking the cloth pouch from John. Seeing Jack hold the pouch but not use the medicine inside, John curiously asked, Aren't you going to drink it? Jack sighed, replying, It's pointless to drink it now. Jack pulled 3 dark red vials from the pouch, identical to the one John had given him. This is payment for your medicine. John nodded, accepting the 3 vials. Yes, this is an alchemy, he said. My high-grade potion has turned into 3 high-grade potions. Jack stood up and stepped down from the carriage. John followed him out. Looking at the bodies strewn across the blood-red earth, John asked Jack for his opinion. What do you plan to do with these bodies? Jack seemed unconcerned, replying casually, Just leave them. They'll be eaten by monsters, or someone will find them eventually. John expressed some worry about the Marquis's men. They'll be suspicious if you're the only one not among them. Jack picked up his luggage and asked John suspiciously why. He didn't understand. John responded helplessly, Who else could it be? The Marquis, of course. Jack tucked the cloth pouch into his luggage, a smug look spreading across his face as he looked at John. Even if he suspects, he won't be able to harm me. John voiced his thoughts. If I were him, I'd summon you immediately. Jack's gambling spirit ignited once more. Want to bet? Learning from the previous wager, John firmly shook his head. No, I'll just lose again. Jack squatted down, sighing in mock dejection. Really, John, you're too smart for your own good. He frowned, resting his chin on his hand as he squatted, seemingly irritated. John abruptly knelt before Jack, taking him by surprise. Believe that there is something for you to believe in. Jack touched his lips, half joking, half serious. Besides me, no one knows you're here, right? John answered confidently, Of course. Jack pressed him, Are you sure? John hastily explained, I created an illusion. Right now, I'm definitely cleaning the outhouse. Inside the outhouse, the maids, seeing John sweeping, gazed at him dreamily. Steward John, you're truly dedicated to your work. John finished speaking and stood up. Jack watched him intently. A 9th-level summoning circle, practically a duplicate. John seemed lost in thought, but Jack had already walked a short distance away. He even imagined the scene of John being captured and brought before the Marquis. The Marquis would likely interrogate him about what had transpired that day. When the Marquis learned the truth, those probing spears of questioning would be aimed directly at John. Jack also instructed him on how to respond. If things get bad, tell him I did it. In the worst-case scenario. If the Marquis looks like he's about to kill you, tell him this. John asked curiously, Tell him what? Jack didn't hide anything. His gaze was unwavering, a glint of crimson in his eyes as he looked directly at John. If you or your sister die, it will be the beginning of the end for the Marquis's family. After Jack spoke these words, an unnatural silence fell over the surroundings. John stood stunned, a look of alarm etched across his face. You're worrying me. Seeing the tension etched on John's face, Jack offered a dismissive chuckle. It's just a hypothetical, don't look so serious. He looked at John, his voice thoughtful. I can only hope. The Marquis will treat her like his own daughter. You can tell him I'm giving him one last chance. John hesitated for a moment, then asked, But you must go to the academy, truly. Jack gave a quiet hum of affirmation. John, still unable to shake his worry, pressed on. What if the Marquis summons you? I've already considered all of that. The academy has its own rules, doesn't it? Understanding dawned on John's face at Jack's explanation. He bowed his head in farewell to the young master. I understand. Then I'll take my leave here. His face was a mask of conflicting emotions. It was clear he desperately wanted to accompany Jack. Jack clapped John on the shoulder, saying, That would be fun, but now isn't the right time. Be careful of monsters on your way back. John was reluctant to leave, but knew he must. Will I see you again in 4 years? He asked, the question tinged with a desperate hope. Jack extended his hand, waving goodbye to John. The next words weren't a command, but a heartfelt plea. No matter what, please take care of my sister. After John's departure, Jack sat in the carriage, lost in thought for a moment. John's gone too. Now let's see. He held out a finger, beginning to calculate his route. Considering I've camped in the mountains 3 times, from the Marquis estate to the academy. Jack murmured the names of the routes under his breath. It will take 4 days if I take the main road, but if I go through the mountains, it will also take 4 days. After a moment of calculation, he grabbed his luggage and set off. He looked up at the sky, surmising the proximity of a village. Jack walked to the front of the carriage, untied the ropes binding the horse, and unloaded the cargo. He stepped onto the carriage's footboard, attempting to mount the horse. But he couldn't quite manage it. Despite his strength, his small stature proved a hindrance. With considerable effort, Jack finally hauled himself onto the horse's back. He panted, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Having a small body is so inconvenient. And so, he began to ride the black horse, ambling forward. He crossed a small bridge. But beneath this tranquil scene, more than 20 lives had been lost. It was so peaceful, one wouldn't believe such a thing had happened so recently. He looked up at the full moon, its gentle light bathing the star-studded sky. I'm not going straight to the academy. She's probably back to her original form now. I feel bad for John and my sister, but my priority now is my teacher. The one who allowed me to live. The one who gave me the power to take revenge. And turned me from the biggest fool in the world into a normal person. Even though she's been forgotten, she stood at the pinnacle of dark magic. She was a terror to those who still remembered her. Jack rode on, wondering how long it had been. Deep within the Arbeloa forest lay a small fiefdom. The fiefdom of Baron Arbeloa, a vassal to the assembled dukedom. Jack's attention was drawn to a roadside inn. Should we rest here for the night? A gaggle of children frolicked before the inn's entrance, the air thick with the carefree sounds of play. Jack watched them for a moment, a smile touching his lips, before drawing his own conclusion. Judging by the looks on their faces, this must be a pleasant place to live. Jack pushed open the inn's door and stepped inside. The interior was indeed cozy and inviting. Small groups of patrons huddled together, their conversations a lively mix of gossip and news, both local and far-flung. Tables were laden with food, mostly bread and sausages. In addition, there was a brown-furred dog, exceedingly friendly, almost as if it had known Jack in a past life. Scratching the dog behind the ears, Jack made his way to an empty table. Hopefully, no one would try to pick a fight with him here. He had barely sat down when a cheerful voice boomed from behind him. It's not often I see such a young traveler on their own. It was a young woman with sun-kissed skin and milk chocolate brown hair. A scar traced a path across her face, a memento perhaps of a battle with some monstrous creature. Most striking, however, was the clear, untroubled look in her eyes. Menu in hand, she asked brightly, looking for a meal, or perhaps a room. Looking at the welcoming woman and dog before him, Jack hesitated. Could she be a server? He thought. She looks more like a mercenary. He pulled out 3 gold coins and stated his request. I'd like a light meal, a glass of water, and a room. I've left my belongings with my horse, so if you wouldn't mind bringing them up for me. The woman's eyes crinkled in a smile. 1 coin will be plenty. I'll get you an apple tart, an Arbeloa specialty, and a steak, too, since you're still growing. Her enthusiasm was slightly alarming. Not dangerous, just intense. Since you're a youngster, milk, then. Or perhaps some ale. Jack quickly replied, milk will be fine. With his order taken, the woman bustled off, leaving the dog to entertain him. Just a moment, then. Play with Arnold here. Jack rubbed his temples. Certainly. He glanced at the 2 remaining gold coins on the table. Quite lively. Seems like a good place to live. She doesn't seem intent on cheating an obvious outsider. Jack gently stroked the dog's soft fur. Perhaps it's because war hasn't touched this place yet. The dog suddenly grinned at him. With the experience of 2 lifetimes, Jack felt a pang of helplessness at the dog's innocent smile. You have no idea what the future holds, do you, you carefree creature? He sighed, looking at the dog. Well, perhaps blissful ignorance is a blessing. Suddenly, a loud conversation caught his attention. Hey, have you heard? The table behind him was buzzing with excited chatter. I hear they're planning to completely eradicate that evil spirit's influence this time. I heard they're mobilizing a huge number of mana users. It's supposed to be a massive operation, one of the men said excitedly. Why such unnecessary actions? A voice drifted to Jack's ears, tinged with disbelief. Even the Tulkan Empire avoids drawing attention. How can we possibly manage this with a mere 20,000 mana users? He listened, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. We've become a laughingstock, haven't we? The rich aroma of thick steak sizzling on the fire filled the air. I mentioned it before, but the Iron Blood Knights, our elite force, have been dispatched to the Demon Beast Forest for a subjugation mission. By order of the king of Teslon has gathered the private armies of each noble house and decided to send them to subjugate the Demon Beast Forest alongside the mercenaries. A vast, monstrous forest with towering mountains, known as the Great Gorge, serves as its base. One of the neutral zones, though it appears ordinary enough. But it's home to ogres, trolls, elves, harpies, egomi. These monsters are actually quite useful to humans. Ogre blood is used in potion making, trolls' sinews for bowstrings, and the monsters called Perius, born of iron, are used in crafting weapons and armor. There are many other uses, too. Harpies' feathers are used for women's accessories, and goblins are kept as pets for their appearance. A dog, enjoying Jack's affectionate strokes, lay at his feet. The reason they're trying to conquer a neutral zone like the Demon Beast Forest. It must be human greed. He rested his chin on his hand, lost in thought. Not only that, but no matter what, this conquest will fail. How many lives will be lost this time? He began to recall information about this battle from his previous life. The Iron Blood Knights lost a third of their forces, and the private armies of the other nobles suffered similar losses. A terrible defeat. Because of this failure, the king of this country lost the affection of the people and the support of the nobles. Jack pondered silently. That was probably the beginning of the internal division within the empire. About a year later, I believe a civil war broke out. A tankard slammed onto a nearby table. That king is the root of the problem. The tankard belonged to a blond man who, fueled by drink, began to speak recklessly. I swear, if an incompetent fool holds power. The man's companion quickly stood, clamping a hand over his mouth. Do you want to lose your head? The surrounding patrons began to take notice. The man offered a nervous laugh, attempting to diffuse the tension. He's had too much. Jack observed them with silent disdain. The fool had no sense of self-preservation. Countless people had been executed for insulting the nobility and the king. Suddenly, he found himself the subject of conversation at the next table. But have you heard about the third son of the Marquis family? The blond man, slurring his words, asked him. What about him? His companion replied, I heard that the third son of House Valantier uses dark magic. A ripple of murmurs spread through the other patrons. That brat. I even heard he was imprisoned. How terrifying. Jack sat off to the side, listening helplessly as they gossiped about the Marquis's third son, the very same brat who was sitting right beside them. The blond man seemed a bit perplexed by it all. But how could that kid learn dark magic? Weren't dark mages wiped out ages ago? The red-haired woman at their table stifled a derisive laugh. Isn't he the Marquis's idiot son? He probably just stumbled across it somewhere. From behind them, the woman who had been carrying the tray earlier approached. What's all the merriment about? Jack looked at the heaping plate of food in front of him, puzzled by the woman's words. He touched his face. He hadn't even realized he was smiling. The woman, making herself at home, sat down across from him and asked, care to share the joke? I'm bored and business is slow. Looking at her, Jack saw a vibrant, sociable exterior that hinted at something more enigmatic. He simply smiled and said, nothing much. It's just amusing how people think the Marquis's third son is an idiot. He offered a casual explanation for his smile. I overheard them, and it was quite funny. The woman responded with easy familiarity. People are like that. They judge things based on rumors and hearsay, things they haven't seen for themselves. Jack studied her for a moment, then asked, and what about you? She seemed momentarily confused. What about me? Jack elaborated on his earlier point about judgment. She let out a small "oh," a smile playing on her lips. Of course, I judge things after I've seen them with my own eyes. Rumors are just rumors, after all. Jack picked up his knife, preparing to cut into his steak, a hint of amusement on his face. But sometimes, rumors are true. The woman leaned forward, propping herself up on the table with an air of casual confidence. Is that so? Jack replied evenly, indeed. He cut a piece of the golden brown apple pie and brought it to his mouth. The sweetness of the honey and apples intertwined within the pastry was intoxicating. He took a bite. A childish expression briefly returned to his face as he silently judged the pie. It couldn't compare to John's baking, of course, but it was decent. The woman across from him suddenly spoke. Anyway, she crossed her arms over her chest, shielding the curves beneath. That's just my opinion. Jack's chewing stopped abruptly. He looked at her. She winked playfully, her tone suggestive. But since the Marquis's third son is much more captivating than the rumors suggest, I don't think they're entirely accurate, do you? He stopped eating, staring at Abe Latte in surprise. Jack seemed frozen by her words, his gaze fixed in one direction. What is it? Abe Latte asked. She used her knife to cut his steak into smaller, more manageable pieces. Jack realized this innkeeper was no ordinary woman. From the scar on her face to her strong, athletic build, and the mercenaries who frequented the inn, something about her screamed competence. As Jack observed and assessed her, Abe Latte finished cutting the steak and cheerfully offered him the plate. Jack immediately voiced his conclusion. You're the branch manager of the Adventurers Guild, aren't you? Abe Latte was initially taken aback, unsure how this young man had discerned her true profession. She was also surprised by his sharp analytical skills and keen observation, noting the meticulous detail he'd picked up on. But a moment later, a smile bloomed on her face. Jack leisurely took a bite of his apple pie. Of course, this wasn't just a guess. There are mercenaries in every town. Wanderers searching for work, roaming from town to town, seeking opportunities to make a living. They're willing to do just about anything. They're hired as soldiers in territorial disputes, as errand boys fetching lost cats, or even as monster hunters. These kinds of jobs are offered to them within the town or the local Adventurers Guild branch. And Adventurers Guild branches are usually built near inns and taverns. Jack wiped his mouth. You must be quite busy, managing the branch and the inn. Abe Latte held out her hands in a gesture of nonchalance, as if it were nothing. While it is my main job, there's not much to do at the moment. This isn't exactly a bustling territory. She sighed and continued, I need to make a living too, you know. Hearing this, Jack surmised that the inn he was currently dining in was likely an establishment owned by the Adventurers Guild. He looked at Abe Latte with a newfound respect. That's quite an enterprising venture. At his words, Abelott's eyes crinkled in amusement. Jack studied her for a moment longer, lost in thought. He realized that while he was known as the fool of the Marquis's family, it was nothing more than a tale mercenaries often boasted about over drinks. But Jack had a feeling. She had recognized his identity in this remote, desolate place. Just a branch manager of the guild. He looked at Abe Latte, a certain realization dawning on him, remembering certain events that had betrayed his true identity. The scene flashed back to a few minutes earlier, before he entered the town. The sound of hooves came to a halt before the town gates. See, Jack said triumphantly. I knew there was a town nearby. He spoke to his horse, as much as to himself. The long journey had begun to take its toll. He felt weary, utterly exhausted. But as Jack and his horse approached the gate, two fully armed guards stood in their path. Their weapons, gleaming brightly, were held at the ready as they stopped him. They began to question his reason for arriving and who he traveled with. Jack responded bluntly, reason. He pulled a crimson badge from within his tunic. Emblazoned upon it was a golden bird in flight. Is this explanation enough? The guard instantly recognized the Marquis family's crest. He stammered, forgive me for not recognizing a descendant of the Marquis family. Jack rode leisurely into the town. The two guards bowed their heads in apology, wishing him a pleasant visit. Jack snapped his fingers. Of course. Good work. He popped a piece of steak into his mouth, then addressed Abe Latte, saying that regardless of how important the information, approaching the guards without the Lord's permission was dangerous. Abe Latte laughed at this. You're worried about me. Jack smiled in response. Only now, he thought. At least she's being kind to me for now, he mused, despite hearing those rumors. The image of the knights and his older brother flashed through his mind. At least she isn't like them. Abe Latte smiled, expressing her gratitude. Then, she extended her hand, beaming. I'm the branch manager of the Alaves Adventurers Guild here in Arbeloa. My name is Jane Arbeloa. Jack shook her hand, but realized her last name, Arbeloa, was the same as the territory. This meant she was undoubtedly connected to the local nobility, quite possibly the Lord's daughter. He asked directly, are you the first or second daughter? Arbeloa, amused by his deduction, scratched her head. Third, actually. My eldest brother is the lord of these lands. Jack found himself intrigued by this noble woman. A noble doing mercenary work, something typically reserved for commoners. He took a sip of milk. Impressive, he complimented. He then continued his questioning. Aren't nobles usually married off around your age? Most of them are. Arbeloa scratched her head again. Well, I enjoy this work. Besides, no one in my family is looking to sell me off. Jack fell into thought, feeling a pang of envy at Arbeloa's family dynamic, so different from his own. A wonderful family, he murmured. He realized she possessed a genuinely cheerful and optimistic disposition. She playfully interacted with her dog, Arnold, a constant smile gracing her face. The dog, equally enthusiastic, seemed inseparable from her. Stroking her pet's belly, Arbeloa asked, "A young lord like yourself, what brings you here alone? Where's your escort?" Jack, taking another bite of beef, replied, "What need does a fool have for an escort?" Arbeloa's jaw dropped slightly. Anyone would take his words as a self-deprecating joke. "You're interesting," she praised. "Just as I thought. You're quite different from the rumors." Jack and Arbeloa moved towards an agreement. "I need people. This journey is long, and I can't go alone. I want to hire some escorts." Arbeloa's business acumen kicked in. "How many?" she asked immediately. Jack held up 3 fingers, 2 gold coins up front, and 3 more upon arrival. Arbeloa's face lit up. Generous, she commended. Beside her, Arnold also seemed pleased, likely anticipating extra meat. With the agreement settled, Jack began to calculate. In truth, he'd been a bit impulsive offering 5 gold coins. After all, escorting merchants typically cost 30 coppers per person. The imperial currency was simple enough. 100 bits made a copper, and 100 coppers made a gold coin. Jack finished his meal, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and expressed his gratitude to Ablate. Ablate, cradling her dog, Arnold, cheerfully asked Jack, "Those 5 gold coins don't include food and separate services, do they?" She promised to have everything prepared for him by the next day. Knowing full well Abelott's fondness for coin, Jack reached for his backpack and retrieved his money pouch. 3 gleaming gold coins appeared in Jack's hand. He calmly stated, "These 3 gold coins are what I've prepared. A carriage and horses would be greatly appreciated." Ablate nuzzled her head against Arnold, her eyes cast downwards. "You're a generous guest," she murmured. Handing Jack a key, she instructed him not to worry and to get some rest. "I'll gather some seasoned mercenaries," she assured him. Jack left the table and returned to his room. He seemed to have complete faith in Abelott's abilities. Besides, with someone as intriguing as her around, nothing too untoward could happen in this town. Jack ascended to the 2nd floor of the inn. Lanterns hung in the hallway, illuminating the clean and tidy space. He opened the door to his room, glanced around, and entered to rest. Lying on the bed, Jack closed his eyes, a sigh of contentment escaping his lips. His eyes grew heavy, the weight of sleep and exhaustion settling upon him. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to drift off, but then remembered he hadn't bathed. But the weariness was too overwhelming to resist. Darkness enveloped him, the moonlight filtering through the window, casting an ethereal glow. The silence was unnerving, so profound that even the smallest sniffle would echo. And someone was sniffling. The face of a young boy materialized in the chiaroscuro, hazy and indistinct. Moonlight glinted off his chest, a cold, metallic sheen. The boy continued to weep, seemingly trying to suppress the sounds, stifling his cries. From his position, he looked up, like a frog at the bottom of a well, gazing at the night sky. The full moon hung suspended above, perfectly aligned with the well's opening, a flawless equilibrium. But into this scene intruded a chaotic tangle of chains, and a voice boomed, "What a pitiful child." A chained hand reached down towards him, offering to help him up, devoid of any malice. The boy stared at the hand, fear etched on his face. The voice spoke again. "Do you intend to live like this, powerless, forever?" The boy shook his head, tears streaming down his face. The figure began to emerge from the moonlight, the chains upon her reflecting the lunar glow. Hands and long, teal-colored hair suggested a woman. Though kindness is not a sin, incompetence is a grave offense. "Do you desire change?" The boy's eyes widened, fixing on the woman. Her image sharpened, revealing a fur cloak draped over a long, black, high-slit dress. She knelt on the ground, the chains around her as if binding her in place. He knelt beside her, stammering, I want to change. The woman grasped his hand. With her other hand, she clutched his cloak, pulling him closer. Good, she said. She seized the opportunity to embrace him tightly, whispering, from now on, call me master. Jack's eyes snapped open. It had all been a dream. He bolted upright, his body flushed, breath ragged. The first rays of dawn painted the town of Arbeloa, announcing the arrival of a new day. The town slowly came into focus, details emerging from the shadows. Its inhabitants began to stir, their voices a rising murmur of activity. Jack pillowed his head on his hands, wanting to drift back to sleep, but the sunlight, now streaming through the window, and the growing clamor from the town below made it impossible. Suddenly, his door swung open. Ablate poked her head into the room, booming a cheerful good morning. She informed Jack that everything was prepared for their departure. She seemed to have assumed he was still asleep, her boisterous entrance a deliberate attempt to rouse him. Jack, startled by her sudden appearance, grumbled, knock before you enter, please. Arnard, Abelott's dog, gazed at Jack with adoring eyes. Then, with the force of a legendary golden lion, the dog launched itself at Jack, tackling him to the floor. Arnard, in a display of exuberant affection, licked Jack's face as if they hadn't seen each other in years. Jack, exasperated, pushed the dog's head away, preventing it from getting too close. What the hell, he muttered. First thing in the morning. The scene shifted to the inn's hallway. Jack, now ready to depart, yawned as he walked, luggage in hand, wearily descending the stairs. Ablate glanced at him, her expression quickly brightening into a radiant, sunrise smile. You're up. I trust you slept well. Jack offered her a small smile. I did, Ablate replied, which is why I've secured you a high-quality carriage. Gesturing towards a group of imposing, well-built mercenaries, she added, I've also recruited some seasoned veterans for your escort. Jack looked at the two men, recalling how they had gossiped about him the previous night. Now, they were to escort him to his destination. Recognizing him, they stammered, We await your command, master. An older man, clad in a dark blue cloak, his hair streaked with silver, stepped forward, arms crossed. I am the captain of the Fire Ant Mercenary Company, and I will be responsible for your safe passage to Stone Mountain. John Doe. Jack repeated the name, seemingly struck by it. John Doe, Jack said. That's a name used for unidentified bodies. Jack realized, with a flicker of surprise, that the man was using an alias, likely as a precaution should anything untoward happen that might compromise his true identity. Jack extended his hand to John Doe. An interesting choice, he remarked. Doe seemed to take it as a compliment. Doe then estimated the distance and travel time from the town to Stone Mountain, concluding that it was a considerable journey. Not including the smaller towns we'll stop at along the way, he explained. The area in between is largely uninhabited, so we'll have to camp out in the open twice. His words revealed a clear familiarity with the route and terrain. Doe continued, briefly outlining the capabilities of the other two members of his team. Jack stifled a yawn. So, I don't have to do anything, right? He asked succinctly. Doe beamed, saying, That's right. Jack, without further ado, addressed the mercenaries. All right, let's get going. I'm tired. The three men responded in unison, Yes, sir. As the group made their way to the inn's entrance, Jack suddenly turned back, as if he had forgotten something or wanted to say something to Ablate. He offered a compliment. You recommended a rather interesting mercenary. Ablate winked. He's a veteran, she replied, then gestured towards Arnard. In Jack's eyes, the individuals Ablate had chosen for him were anything but ordinary. He observed, sensing hidden depths beginning to surface. First, there was John Doe. Despite being a 9th-level summoner, he concealed his true identity and power. He was certainly no ordinary man. Even the 8th-level mercenary standing before Jack seemed to be hiding his true strength and background. Ablate, noticing Jack's scrutinizing gaze, smiled. Didn't you say you wanted a veteran? Jack returned the smile. I think we'll be seeing each other again. Ablate responded enthusiastically. Oh, then let's have a drink together next time. Jack winked. Maybe I will, if you're buying. With that, the group departed from the inn. Ablate remained at the doorway, her bright smile unwavering. Waving farewell to Jack. Safe travels, my dear little guest. After leaving the inn, Jack and his company headed straight for the edge of the forest, where a swift stream flowed. The carriage wheels rolled steadily under Doe's guidance. Jack lay atop the carriage, his head resting on his hands, eyes closed, enjoying the gentle breeze and the fresh air. He opened his eyes, gazing up at the clear blue sky. White clouds drifted lazily, and the sunlight bathed him in a gentle warmth, as if caressing him. What a beautiful day, Jack thought to himself. In his palm, a pale green energy flowed between his wrist and fingertips. Jack watched it, fascinated. I feel much better than yesterday, he mused. Perhaps having company made him feel considerably more at ease. Doe glanced at Jack, studying him intently. Jack felt a little self-conscious under the scrutiny. Why does he keep staring at me? He wondered. Then, Jack abruptly sat up, pointing at the blonde guard. You have a general idea of who I am, right? The guard nodded hesitantly. Yes, he stammered. I only heard that you are the son of a nobleman. Jack's expression relaxed slightly. Oh, really? He replied, then sat cross-legged, gesturing for the guard to continue. Yes. The guard went on. The branch manager said she thought you were on a journey around the world. Jack echoed the phrase, a journey around the world. But I'm curious about something. The guard, eager to answer any questions, replied, Yes, ask anything. Jack reached into his coat pocket, seemingly about to retrieve something. Then, tossing his family crest to the blonde guard, he said, Here, take this. The guard stammered, Isn't this the crest of a noble family? Jack said, Judging by your face, it seems you recognize this. But you aren't entirely sure, are you? Jack continued, Over there, there's a tattered marquis family, called Valantier, about to crumble, right? This is their crest. Sitting cross-legged, Jack began to chat with the mercenaries. He spoke of the Valantier family as if they were something utterly contemptible. Jack finished speaking, paused for a moment, then burst into raucous laughter. The mercenaries looked at him, bewildered by his words. Suddenly, Jack's expression turned serious, his voice dropping low. Come to think of it, he mused, I believe there must be someone in that house they call a fool, right? He laughed again, a predatory gleam in his eyes. You too, right? It wasn't a laugh of genuine amusement, but a calculated jab, a psychological assault on his subordinate. Jack continued, That fool was imprisoned not too long ago. Ever since he'd seen the Valantier family crest in Jack's possession, the blonde mercenary had begun to suspect something. After hearing Jack's words, his apprehension grew. Jack added, with a chillingly cheerful tone, Funny, isn't it? They seemed to have realized Jack's status. It wasn't surprising. He had, after all, spelled it out for them quite clearly. After I got out of prison, Jack went on, it seems someone spread a rumor that I used black magic or something. The mercenary, still trembling, stood beside him. What's wrong, River? Jack asked, his voice deceptively gentle. River trembled, seemingly even more frightened than before, stammering, I apologize. Jack scoffed. Well, the rumors aren't entirely wrong. I do know a bit of black magic, after all. Jack's reasoning was that his master was at the pinnacle of black magic, so even as a swordsman, he couldn't help but know a thing or two about it. But, Jack explained, this time resting his chin on his hand, bringing his face close to River's, why would I use something like that when I have these fists? He resumed his intimidation tactics, suddenly pointing at another mercenary. You. The mercenary Jack pointed at was momentarily speechless, managing only a choked, why yes. Jack leaned down, looking at the mercenary, and asked, Why didn't you do anything when this one was mocking me? You stopped him when he spoke ill of the king. Jack lowered his voice, speaking slowly, I'm very disappointed. You know. He reached out a hand, as if to seize the mercenary by the throat. Jack thought to himself. The branch manager. It's probably just him. The other mercenaries probably don't know anything about this. Jack clapped the mercenary on the shoulder. Well, let bygones be bygones. Maintaining his smile. He continued, We'll be together for the next few days, after all, right? The mercenary gave a strained laugh, tinged with fear. Yes, please. Take care. Of us. The group continued on until nightfall. The forest remained dense and lush, but the sunlight had vanished, replaced by the distant twinkle of stars. A campfire crackled merrily, casting flickering shadows as the weary travelers, master and mercenaries alike, finally stopped for the night and began to talk amongst themselves. River said, "I'm reminded once again that rumors, after all, are just rumors." "Why did you suddenly say that?" Jack asked. River was silent for a long moment, as if pondering something deeply. After a while, he scratched his head and said with a chuckle, "It's just that you don't seem like other nobles. Those nobles hate even touching water, but you went and washed dishes. You're really not normal." Jack's eye suddenly caught something, and he quickly looked towards it. Something had captured his attention. It was the food laid out on the table. The delicious aroma, the vibrant colors, the sheer variety of dishes. He couldn't resist. He apologized to Jane, admitting he couldn't control himself any longer. Jack showered the meal with praise. He couldn't stop eating. Everything was simply too delicious. The baked pudding, the meat pies. He even mused about poaching the cook for his own personal service. A while later, Jack's stomach was full, but he still seemed to want just a little bit more. The food was too tempting to resist. Seeing Jack's satisfied expression, the guards were delighted that their meal had pleased their employer. A sudden pang of guilt struck Jack as he remembered the steward back home. He felt a twinge of remorse for John. "Well," he thought, "consider this the price of a good meal. You know I'm a gourmand." Jack sat cross-legged, sipping hot tea. The thought of the long night ahead prompted him to ask, "How are you planning to divide the night watch?" River replied, "We draw straws." He grinned and asked, "Want to join in?" But Jack reminded him, "A growing lad like me needs his sleep. If I don't get taller, are you going to take responsibility?" River seemed not to hear him. He waved his hand dismissively. "Come on, it'll be fine." And so, Jack and the guards gathered around the small fire, chatting amongst themselves. Jack suggested they each take turns telling stories, volunteering to go first. It was a way to subtly and naturally extract information from them. Despite volunteering, Jack hadn't yet figured out what to tell. He asked himself, and the others, what should I tell first? Jack began his story. He started with a question, how many dragons are there in the world? Or something along those lines. River interjected, dragons. Didn't the founding king, Julius Teslan, or someone, wipe them out centuries ago? All eyes turned to Jack, waiting for his response to the question he himself had posed. Exactly, Jack replied. The founding legend can be summarized like that, leaving out some unnecessary flowery language. The founding king, Julius Teslan, along with his 2 aides, destroyed all the dragons in these western lands and built the Teslan Empire, the predecessor of the current Teslan Kingdom. Over time, the Teslan Empire evolved into the Teslan Kingdom and became a nation under the Tulkun Empire. Jack smiled. As of now, this is the truth everyone knows. At this point, Jack began to spread his hand, listing the surviving dragons he could recall. There are 2 dragon lords in the Black Sea region, a small one in the Tulkun Imperial Palace, and 5 others in the Monster Forest. Jack had also overheard from the Wanderers' conversations that 8 other dragons were scattered across the continent. So, at least 16 dragons still existed on this land. Hearing this, everyone fell silent, aghast. It meant that many dragons were still out there, soaring through the skies, a hidden danger lurking. Jack had anticipated this reaction. He knew that when he told the mercenaries these stories about dragons, they certainly wouldn't believe him. Not only because dragons existed only in legends, but also because no one had ever seen them. Jack looked at the mercenaries, a smile playing on his lips. "Quite a tale, isn't it?" he said. John Doe pondered for a moment before replying. "So, the founding king didn't completely eradicate the dragons." Jack smiled. "It seems Doe is finally reacting to my story," he thought. Aloud, he said, "That coward. He didn't eradicate the dragons at all. He merely created an opportunity to negotiate with them. Or rather," he added, "it was his nameless right-hand man who did everything." Jack smiled, waiting for their reactions to his tale. "So," John Doe asked, "where are these dragons now?" "The continent as we know it," Jack began, "isn't all there is to the world. Simply put, this is the Western continent, and there's an Eastern continent on the other side." Feeling his story wasn't impactful enough, Jack omitted the origin and purpose of the lesser dragons. He spoke of the Dragon Lords. "The Dragon Lords," Jack declared, "have only one mission, to protect the boundary of the Black Sea." Doe questioned, "The boundary? I don't know the details, Jack admitted. But it's the boundary separating the east and west continents. A boundary that appeared millennia ago. The Dragon Lords inherited the duty to protect it. He confessed, honestly, I'm curious myself. Lowering his voice, Jack mused, what kind of world lies on the eastern continent, the one the Dragon Lords protect? Everyone exchanged glances, a long silence hanging in the air. No one spoke, no one asked questions. Only the crackling of the fire and the whoosh of the flames filled the quiet. Ruver's lips were pressed tight, his eyes wide, as if he were struggling to contain something he wanted to blurt out. He kept making small, grunting noises, a comical sight. Then, the mercenaries burst into laughter, tears streaming down their faces. It turned out they had only been pretending to listen intently to Jack's story. Ruver clapped Jack on the shoulder, his voice laced with sarcasm. My young master," he said, "you're quite the storyteller. You must have been longing for some companions to chat with on this journey." Jack closed his eyes, a small smile playing on his lips. He told himself he had to forgive them. Let it go, he thought. Don't expect them to trust me. Doe smiled back, an expression that didn't quite seem like mockery. Get your hands off me, Jack said, his voice laced with a sudden sharpness. Are you drunk? The words were a pointed reminder to Ruver of his place. Ruver, realizing he'd overstepped, quickly apologized. Jack remained unconvinced. I still don't expect them to trust me, he mused internally. Jack stood up, feigning anger. Well, it doesn't matter if you don't believe me. Doe, thinking his master was genuinely upset, inquired, Master, are you going to bed? I still need to bathe and change, Jack replied casually. Ruver, seemingly anxious to appease him, eagerly offered to show him where he could wash. But Jack waved him off. No need. I can manage myself. A single lamp perched on a rock, casting a faint glow across the area. Jack walked to the edge of the lake, testing the water with his hand. Satisfied with the temperature, he stepped in with a sigh of relief. The water felt wonderfully refreshing. From beyond a thicket of bushes, the mercenaries' voices carried, loud enough to echo through the trees. They don't believe a word I said, Jack thought. Why did I even bother telling them so much? He splashed water on his face, replaying the conversation in his mind. Self-recrimination gnawed at him. He sat motionless as a statue, questioning himself. Why can't I control my tongue? I'm supposed to be hiding my power. This is so frustrating. A moment later, he leaned back against a rock, closing his eyes and letting the cool water wash over him. It felt good, relaxing. But despite his efforts to unwind, his mind raced. One moment he was seeking tranquility, the next he was lost in thought again. He could hear the men on the other side of the bushes, their boisterous chatter echoing through the night, a familiar soundtrack to their mercenary lives. His thoughts drifted to John Doe. He suspected the man might be a spy for Tulkin. Something about him felt off. The more he considered it, the more the branch manager and Doe seemed connected, their actions shrouded in suspicion. He looked up at the moon, the knots in his thoughts tightening. He clicked his tongue in frustration. I asked her to recommend some mercenaries for an escort, he thought, and she sends me a nobody with 8th level energy. Doe is 8th level. Isn't the current Blood Knight captain also 8th level? Someone with his power would be welcomed anywhere. Why would he be the captain of a no-name mercenary band? It doesn't make sense. Is there something more to Doe's story? The bright moonlight seemed to beckon him, offering a moment of solace in the midst of his swirling thoughts. The tranquility of the scene offered a balm to his troubled mind. Enough, Jack muttered to himself. He brought a hand to his chest, channeling energy into it. Instead of worrying about others, I should focus on myself. He could feel the effects of the soul's speech, the healing it had brought him during his time at the inn and on the journey in the carriage. Jack flicked his wrist. The healing energy was spent. He rose from the lake, his mind still churning. And then there was Doe. As long as the suspicion of him being a spy lingered, Jack couldn't allow him to remain in their company. Dressing, Jack thought. I doubt I'll even get a chance to properly question him. The campfire still crackled merrily, sending the faint scent of burning sap and damp earth into the air. Seeing Jack approach, Doe greeted him. Finished your bath, my lord. Jack walked towards Doe, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword. He advanced slowly, his words cryptic. Yes. It bothered me longer than I expected, so I could only continue to bathe and think. Do, puzzled, asked, "What's bothering you?" Jack's gaze locked onto Do. He enunciated each word. "Do you really want to ask?" Suddenly, Jack thrust the point of his sword towards Do. "You are what's bothering me," he declared. Do's men started to rise, but he gestured for them to stay seated. Do and his entire company remained silent, listening intently to Jack's every word, gauging what game the young nobleman was playing, waiting for some semblance of a reasonable explanation. Seeing them settle back down, Jack continued, "Why would an 8th-level energy user like you work as a mercenary?" Do replied, "The place I need to go is very important." Jack's voice rose in anger. "But it's important to me, and I won't bring along someone as secretive as you." The blonde mercenary looked astonished. "What? The boss is 8th level already?" Do told him to be quiet, then addressed Jack. "All right, let's just say I am 8th level. What do you want to do with me?" "I told you an interesting story earlier," Jack said. "Now it's your turn. I want to hear you tell me something interesting." Do's voice was serious. "What will you do if I refuse?" "If you don't satisfy me," Jack replied, "the outcome will likely be death." "Or are you a spy for the Tulkun Empire?" Jack brought up the innkeeper, Jane. "Next time, I'll have a beer with her. But if Do is a spy, she becomes a suspect too." Do lost his composure. "Why are you suddenly bringing trouble to Jane?" "I said that, and you still don't understand." "What are you curious about? You want to ask what Jane's last meal will be like?" Jack asked Do, a harmless smile on his face. "What do you think? Isn't everything becoming more interesting?" Do stood frozen, not immediately reacting to Jack's provocation. Jack watched him, thinking, "I've pushed him this far, and his energy hasn't fluctuated at all. He's either wary or hesitant. A lucky man. I'm not good at controlling my own power," Jack said, "so consider my words carefully. I'll swing the moment his energy wavers. Only death or survival. Simple, isn't it?" "I'll give you 1 minute," Jack stated. "I hope you make the right decision." The scene shifted back to the inn before their departure. Yesterday, inside Jane's inn, 2 figures conversed in the kitchen. Rain stood opposite the cook, who sat eating at the table. Jane's face was practically inches from Do's. "You know," Jane began, her eyes filled with a complex emotion as she looked at Do, "that abandoned youngest son of the Valantier Marquis family. He's quite different from the rumors." She placed a hand on Do's, her expression thoughtful. "You can tell from his eyes," she urged. "He's hiding many secrets." He stared back at her, listening intently as she continued. "He just requested an escort mission, so I'm looking for someone to watch over him." Jane tightened her grip on Do's hand, their fingers interlacing. "Do you know? This child could change our lives." Do snapped back to the present, Jane's words still echoing in his ears. "He's truly different from the rumors." Looking into Jack's eyes, who could call him the scorned, foolish child of the Marquis family? But now, faced with Jack's challenge, Do was utterly at a loss for words. Jack maintained his unsettling smile, his hand gripping his sword tightly. "What will you do?" Jack taunted. "A minute is very short, you know." Jack's demeanor unnerved Do. He felt like prey before a predator. His instincts screamed that this was a dangerous child. Exceptionally so. A silent battle of wills raged between Jack and his would-be bodyguard. Remembering Jane's words, looking into Jack's eyes, a strange feeling, now unsettling, crept over Do. Do pondered, bringing a hand to his chin. How does he know I'm level 8? Looking at Jack's expression, Do assumed Jane had revealed this information. But he immediately dismissed the thought. Impossible. No way, he thought. The image of Jane's affectionate gaze flashing through his mind. I trust her. If she had said anything, she would have told me. A cool breeze rustled through the leaves. The sky remained bright, illuminated by the moon and countless twinkling stars. Jack reminded Do that only 40 seconds remained to make his decision. Do stalled. Probing cautiously, if I truly am level 8, as you say, then you would kill me. At Do's question, Jack offered a sharp look in response. Do met his gaze, bewildered. He couldn't help but wonder how a child's eyes could be so intimidating. It gave him pause. Jack remained motionless, the tip of his sword pointed directly at Do, reinforcing the feeling that this was no jest. The more Do thought about it, the less sense it made. Was the person standing before him even a child? His eyes, his demeanor, didn't match his stature or supposed age. River kept repeating his question, persistently doubting whether Do had truly reached the 8th level. Do paid him little mind, glancing at his companion while still pondering whether to evade the question or answer truthfully. He was utterly lost, faced with the possibility of imminent death, where a single wrong decision meant bidding farewell to life. A chill of fear gripped Do. A cold sweat slicked his skin as he frantically searched his memory for a plausible reason for becoming a high-level mercenary, the excuses he'd used in the past flashing before his eyes. Do closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and began to think. Right, he'd always been lucky. He trusted his instincts. Jack declared time was up, raising his sword. Channeling his energy into the blade, a sinister smile spread across Jack's face. "You disappoint me," he said. "So you must die?" Do suddenly spoke, causing Jack to withdraw his energy. He began with a counter-question. "Do you know Jane's current situation?" Do spread his hands in a gesture of explanation. Jack listened patiently, lowering his sword. "Oh," he said. "All right then. Tell me about it." The surrounding air grew still, as if straining to hear Do's story about Jane. He began to speak. The tale, initially seeming as though it would be long and complex, was surprisingly short and simple. It could be summarized as a love story between a noblewoman and a commoner. A familiar tale, one heard anywhere. An image formed in Jack's mind. A noble princess in a crimson gown, standing within a luxurious manor, while Do, a mere swordsman, gazed up at his goddess from below. Do met Jane when he was 19, already a 7th-level energy user. A single glance, and they were deeply in love. The seed of their love grew with time. Jack pondered, thinking this must be the reason Jane remained unmarried. Yet, something still felt amiss. After all, an 8th-level swordsman held considerable influence in Tesla. Such a person working as a mercenary. It seemed ordinary on the surface, but the implications were complex. Jack assessed silently. Do finished his story and turned to face his subordinates. They were all wondering about the nature of his relationship with Jane. Jack, considering Jane's personality, figured she wouldn't aspire to be a powerful figure. If she wanted to, she could easily establish a large guild and broadcast her fame, instead of remaining in this small town running a nameless establishment. So, Jack finally reached his own conclusion. He pointed at Do and declared, "So, it turns out Jane is just the branch manager of some small-time adventurers guild in this backwater territory, and you're nothing but a mercenary. And you approached me just to prove your usefulness." Even after reaching this conclusion, Jack continued to ponder, wondering whether he should trust him. Stories like these were easy to fabricate. His eyes narrowed, watching for any flicker of energy manipulation from Do. He began to probe cautiously. "Remember the story about the dragon I told you? What do you think the Tulkun Empire does with the dragon whelps?" Do responded calmly, "How could I possibly know? It's just a fairy tale, isn't it?" Jack chuckled. "Perhaps you already have your own answer." He continued, "You see, Master is the title given to those with 10 circles etched into their hearts. But even masters don't know there's a higher realm." Jack raised a hand to his lips, as if signaling for silence. "Creatures who wield soul power instead of energy. They're called transcendents." Do's guards gaped, astonished by Jack's revelation. Jack clenched his fist, a gesture of some unseen resolve or conviction. 2 years ago, the Tulkun Empire's guardian knight, Hanks Beckerman, surpassed the Master Realm and was declared the strongest swordsman on the continent. He was said to have ended the historical journey of the Transcendents, something only found in forgotten histories. But the irony is, that bastard never became a Transcendent, despite possessing such extraordinary power. Quite the intriguing tale, wouldn't you say? Do, still composed, replied to Jack's implied question, "Please, do tell me more." He transfused his blood and half his bones into a dragon. Because of that foolish act, he became something neither human nor dragon. "Indeed," Jack said, "your expressions say it all." He became a complete and utter aberration. Do calmly inquired, "What does this interesting story have to do with our current situation?" Jack didn't answer immediately, instead continuing his narrative. "There's only one dragon left in the Tulkun Imperial Castle now." Jack pointed skyward. "Even for immortal beings, experiments can't be completed with just one subject. That's why they've dispatched those with abilities to other nations. The first objective, intelligence gathering. He raised a second finger. The second objective: confirm the existence of dragons. A smile flickered across Dou's face, then broadened into a laugh. This fictional tale seems a bit more believable now, Dou said cheerfully. If you told this story to other mercenaries, they'd probably believe it. Jack didn't reply, only closing his eyes and shaking his head with a sigh. He had been observing Dou this whole time and hadn't detected any hesitation or doubt. Based on Dou's reaction,